Well, but my name is Dr. Shaunee Wallace, and I am here with the Humanities Department at LaGuardia. And myself, along with my wonderful colleagues here, we're going to introduce ourselves in a second. We are here to talk about media and Black lives. So I'd love to read you an introduction very quickly. So the discussion of media and Black lives is designed to explore the media's impact on Black lives and society. Today, we will discuss stereotypical, racist, and gender-biased images portrayed in the media and its psychological impact on the mental health of Black individuals. Whenever we discuss Black people, there's almost always a conversation about race and racism. So there's no surprise that, unfortunately, racism is woven into the fabric of the foundation of this very nation. So racism has made its way into many entities within the United States and beyond. And this, of course, includes media. So media conglomerates who own media outlets that produce all that we read, all that we see, we click on, listen to. And you know, there's literally less than 10 media conglomerates that own, when you think of all things media, such as television, film, print, video games, music labels, several aspects of the internet. So, you know, all of these things are under that media umbrella. So I just want to touch on a few of the conglomerates just so you can see what I mean. So National Amusements, that's a media conglomerate. They are the primary owners of CBS, Viacom, BET, Showtime, GameSpot. Disney is another one, and they're the primary owners of ABC, A&E, Marvel. You wonder why all those Marvel movies are now on Disney Plus? That's why. And Disney also owns ESPN. So then there's Time Warner. And Time Warner is another very, very powerful media outlet that owns CNN, HBO, channels like Adult Swim. And within the recent years, we have Netflix, we have TikTok. They have actually added themselves to the table. So what does this all have to do with Black lives when we're asking ourselves these questions? What does it have to do with us? Well, in the book, The Black Image in the White Mind, Edmund and Rojecki offered racial representation on television does not actually appear to match crime statistics, with local news overrepresenting Black perpetrators, underrepresenting Black victims, and overrepresenting white victims. So those underrepresented Black victims include Black men, women, and children that have gone missing or abducted. And we've heard some of that most recently because there's a difference with the coverage, the media coverage of Natalie Holloway from many years ago, and most recently, Gabby Petito. So of course, all of the people that ever go missing, we want them to all have coverage, but we want it to be an equal level playing field. So who decides who gets this coverage? Who decides that? Because that's the question. And the people that decide that, we call them gatekeepers. So there's a gatekeeping theory in communication, and that theory states that, literally, think of a person standing at a gate and they let information in or they let information out. And it's literally just like filtered for dissemination. So again, the owners of the media conglomerates, their interests often trickle down. And that's how you see whose stories get told and how they get told. So in short, anytime you see issues of Blacks in the media, it's these media conglomerates who share. So I would like to share a quick video of Mighty Mostef Yasiin Bey. He is going to say just how it can be dangerous with heavy viewership. So please take a listen to Yasiin Bey.
I think the sound is not working.
Yeah.
We might need to share sound.
And closed caption. I got it. I'll put it up.
If you watch the news or the popular media as a primary source of information, you know, your worldview might be very fear-based, you know, and there's a certain level of fear that you know that the system needs to keep inside of people to keep them participating in a certain type of way. I mean, the first response to fear is the cathartic expression of consumerism. So when people get too nervous, they gotta offload it in some way. So that's what the entertainment experience is about. In a lot of instances, the consumerism experience is about. A lot of the European involvement in Africa has been based on the premise of when we come in, the only way we could be comfortable is if you're more like us.
Okay, you can.
You know, and less like yourselves, or some acceptable to us. And
Okay, thank you so much, Charis. Thank you. And again, I'm very sorry, everyone. I'm having technical difficulties here on campus. So with that said, Most Def just talked about the danger of heavy viewership, and he led to stereotypes and how very often that's a part of the agenda. So with that said, I just lastly wanted to talk about to combat these stereotypical images, particularly of Black women. Dr. Patricia Hill, communication theory, that really addresses some of these things. And lastly, despite all of this, even my tech issues, there's joy. There's joy. And the joy looks like Robin Roberts today, Good Morning America, just celebrating 20 years of being a Black media person on air. Joy looks like Oprah Winfrey, Shonda Rhimes, Byron Allen, Lena Waithe, Spike Lee, Tyler Perry, Ava DuVernay, Charles Blow. Being able to see Black people through the lens of Black creators and contributors. So with that said, welcome to Media and Black Lives. Charlene, please take it away.
Hey. Hi, everyone. I hope everybody's doing good today. Before we get started, I want to send out a big, to big up Dima Bakhtar, who was the driving force behind all of this. She was the brains behind all of this, and unfortunately, she couldn't be with us today. But I want her to know that she is in our hearts, in our minds, and we hope everything's well. My name is Charlene Bryant. I'm a member of the Social Science Department in the Criminal Justice Program. And today we have some incredible panelists, some very strong Black women who are leading the charge in the next century, the next century of thinkers. And as Dr. Wallace has indicated, we're going to have a conversation about media and how media is ubiquitous. It touches everything that we see, smell, hear, and feel. And so we would like this opportunity perhaps to have a discussion and maybe exchange ideas and just have a conversation about how media impacts us, not just as a society, but as a culture. So I'm gonna ask the first question. And recently we've all heard And we'd like to take an opportunity to celebrate the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson as the first Black woman to serve on the court. And within the context of media and Black lives, would the panel please speak to this moment in history, because this is an historic moment. And how do, give us some idea of how media represented this historic moment. Just an opinion about how you felt those confirmation hearings went and ultimately the confirmation went.
Good afternoon. I'm Vanessa Bing, Professor of Psychology in the Social Science Department, and this is a historic moment in time. In the Supreme Court's 223, 233, whatever it is, over 200 years history, never, ever has a Black woman been nominated. And this is a moment, right, that we should be celebrating. But I have to tell you, honestly, I was scared for Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I think many Black people, many women also felt that fear, because it's like, we know that she was going to be raked over the coals, right? And everyone says, well, everybody who's going through confirmation is going to be raked through the coals. But there is a particular history, with the way Black women are treated, have been treated in the media, and continue to be treated in the media. We are disparaged, marginalized. The old images and stereotype, if we're either the mammy image, right, or we're the angry Black woman, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson had to be very aware of not, adhering to living up to those stereotypical image. She had to maintain her composure at all times. And, and that's the thing. And we watched her be grilled by the senators, and, her record, in my opinion, impeachable record. But of course, we have to find something problematic. We have to connect her to writings that were not even hers, because, we're concerned about, too many Black issues being brought. How are these Black issues going to impact, how she adjudicates and her role on the court? It's like she went to the best schools, but that's not enough. It's somehow her Blackness is a threat. Now, of course, that is not spoken, but that is understood in the Black community, that her Blackness, her being a woman, is going to be a threat. And for her to have made it this far, oh, she's going to bring that energy to the court. What is that energy going to be? So she's going to be that, again, the angry Black woman, or, they will try to fit her into the model of maybe she'll take care of us. I don't know. But, as someone watching, I didn't even want to watch the confirmation hearing, because I just felt like, they're going to treat her. And it's because we've seen it. The media has really, and there's been an assault on Black women for years. And, even, look at Hollywood, there's no representation, very few representation. And, at this pivotal moment in time, we should all be celebrating. This is history. But yet the confirmation's over. That's old news. Let's just keep moving on. And the vote, well, I think the vote spoke for itself. So, I'm happy. I just think of Maya Angelou and Still I Rise. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will continue to rise in spite of. But it's been both beautiful and painful to watch.
Dr. Osei, would you like to introduce your first and then?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Adjoa Osei. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist practicing in Brooklyn and practicing virtually. And I'm just so thankful to be in this space, because it's such critical conversations that I think we're going to have today about media and Black lives. And so just thinking about that first question, I too found myself holding my breath. I couldn't watch much of the coverage. And I feel like that dilemma as Black women and femmes have kind of held to a different standard, you know that either if you raise your voice a little bit too much, show a little bit too much passion, you're the angry Black woman. Or I also feel that she gets put into this space of kind of what you had mentioned, like the mammy figure, right? Like she's kind of has to take care of everybody, believe Black women, support Black women, and you're just kind of a prop to do everyone else's agenda. And so that was my fear of these kind of two polarizing views. And just kind of what I saw as far as like traditional media on social media is a lot of coded language. And so now it's, these stereotypes are a little more subtle. So it's, you know, her composure. I think C-SPAN got a lot of criticism for a tweet that talked about heated exchange between her and Senator Lindsey Graham. And it's like the heat was only coming from one side and it wasn't her, okay? You're demeaning her, belittling her, but they're trying to make it seem that somehow this was a heated exchange back and forth. And so that's kind of really stood out to me, is that a lot of this messages are kind of very like hidden and it's very subtle, like the words that are used, you know, but they reflect these ongoing stereotypes that we're, you know, so familiar with.
Dr. Wallace, you have anything to share?
Just very briefly, can you hear me? Ooh, okay, thank you. So just very briefly, I just believe that conservative outlets, media outlets did what they did. So that wasn't a surprise to me whatsoever. What I was very pleased with is overall from the media outlets that I did watch, because I didn't really feel comfortable watching the confirmation part. I just did not. I thought that there was no point for me to put myself through that. And I felt very bad for Justice Brown Jackson. What I will say though, is that it was a very historical moment that not only for Black women, for all women, for all Americans, just to be able to see this happen. I was annoyed that it happened now. I believe that it should have been happened, but I'll take it. She's the most qualified. So, which is again, not surprising. I'll talk more about what Audre Lorde says with, talked about with the mythical norm in this country later on down the line, but I'll keep it there.
She did a great job. She did a great job. She gave them nothing. You know, she gave the media nothing. She gave the Senate nothing, and she passed through barely. So go ahead, Dr. Bing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, just a quick comment, because I think the three of us really shared, one thing that we all had in common. We didn't want to watch it, right? And I think part of that has to do with, it's a little traumatizing to watch, a Black woman being treated so poorly. And, I think this will come up in our discussion further. There's a lot of vicarious trauma that we've seen it before. Many of us have been on the receiving end of disrespectful treatment, and just watching it, it just brings it back. It comes alive in our bodies. So, we feel great passion, empathy for her, but it's also very painful, and it activates our system because it's stressful watching it.
You know, someone put a great comment in the chat about it being traumatizing and re-traumatizing, right? Because, collectively we have this shared identity, and it brings up for me so many moments where I've kind of shrunk myself to put the other person at ease so I could accomplish. Yes, racial battle fatigue, we're gonna get into it. Someone just mentioned that into the chat. That cumulative experience, right, of these race-related stress. And it affects us not only mentally, emotionally, but physically. Physically, your body feels this.
Okay, well, if that provoked trauma, the next question will definitely provoke trauma for many people, because I'd like to take an opportunity to ask the panel about their thoughts regarding police brutality and violence against Black people, and how that's represented in the media, and how can we change that narrative?
And the first thing that comes to my mind is I think when we think about media and like traditional forms of media, so when we think about news and radio, there's a sense that somehow the media is neutral, it's apolitical. right? But just as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, they're owned by these huge conglomerates that have an agenda, that have shareholders. And so those are the kind of invisible strings in the back that influence that. And then also when we think about social media, it's a great way to get information, but things are constantly rapidly changing. You're being exposed to things all the time. And when I think about, just images of violence and police brutality through Black people, it's very, dehumanizing. Images are shared over and over again. Victims of this violence are kind of reduced to like a slogan or a tag. On one hand, it raises awareness, but also kind of reduces the person to this one moment. Like I think about Amadou Diallo, shot 41 times. That's all we hear, man shot 41 times. And that's kind of who he becomes. And so I think it's also very dehumanizing. I think that it's almost this trauma that's acceptable to show over and over again, that has a long history when we think about lynching and the impact of slavery, that somehow our bodies are up for public consumption, right? And that's kind of what strikes me, is that sense of how we're not treated with care. So I'll stop there.
I mean, I really think, you spoke for all of us. I mean, it's, we feel it in our soul. And yes, the repetitive nature of these images again and again and again. And it makes you wonder, like, do these news producers, I mean, do they think about what that is like? What is the experience of that repeated exposure of those, this modern day lynching? Whether we're talking about the constant showing of George Floyd and his life being taken from him. Black people feel it in their bodies, in their souls. I mean, and it just sort of brings our whole history forward, thinking of Emmett Till and so many before. And it is this, again, this is this racialized trauma. There's trauma, and then there's racialized trauma. Trauma that is specific to the experience of racism and being a person of color who is experiencing these repeated assaults on our physical person, our bodies. And racialized trauma, like any trauma, it gets stored, it remains in our body. We have physiological responses. I mean, some people literally talked about just feeling so ill watching these images. And yes, one has to question. It's like, do we really need to show these images again and again? Like, what is the messaging behind this? Dr. Osei just said, the dehumanizing nature of it all. It is dehumanizing, and it breaks many people's spirits, and it pulls for angry responses too. And then there's this confusion, like, why are people so angry? Oh my God, did you see the post? That's such an angry post. These are such, this is why this happens. And it's like this vicious cycle and a loop. We continue to be exposed, and we respond and react as any human being would, and our response is unacceptable. So it's just a really a terrible vicious cycle, and a very painful one for people of color in general, Black people in particular, and the media really. I mean, I can't, the media is like this invisible thing, but there are people in charge who decide what goes on the air and how often it does. So I'm sure our communications experts have something to say about that.
Tag me in. Double Dutch. Okay. So George Gerbner was a communication theorist, and he developed a theory called cultivation theory. And so what cultivation theory speaks to is it speaks to the heavy viewership of certain programming. Television programming literally shapes how people think, and it causes them to literally start to believe these things. So when he was referring to certain violent programming, and when you see, like, for example, just children, if they watch certain types of violent cartoons or, martial arts films, and what do they start to do? They start to just go around and, to everybody, because this is what this constant repetition is intended to do. Now, with that said, something starts to happen after a while. Vanessa spoke to it. We get desensitized. So all of a sudden, now with people, women being killed, men being killed, this one's being shot, every single day, there's a rapper being killed. So now it's like, oh, that's messed up. Okay, so what's for dinner? And these images, not only is it heartbreaking and it starts to desensitize, but then what does this do for the person who is ill will towards Black bodies? What does that do? Because it affects all of us. And that's real, the psychologist, you all can speak to that part. But you know, when a Black body is seen as the length of Black life is treated with short worth, I'll quote Mos Def again, then there's a problem when your life does not hold value. When I think of these things, I think of Ahmaud Arbery, who my mother cried because she said over and over, he could be my son. And so when you have that type of identification on our end, as Vanessa spoke to, it's different. It hits different. So I'll stop there.
All right. Well, to touch on a little bit of what the panelists mentioned, we're gonna move in a different direction. I think Dr. Bing mentioned entertainment, and everyone in the panel mentioned or indirectly mentioned something related to Black on Black violence. So our next question is really about, you know, I would love to hear the panelists share their thoughts about how the media has depicted the recent incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock, and how Black culture has been in some ways misinterpreted by white translation.
You know, my first thought when it happened was, I'm so happy I work by myself. So I don't have to have any awkward conversations at work. I don't have to explain or justify anybody's behavior because I'm not gonna do that, you know? So I won't really speak to whether he shouldn't have or shouldn't, you know. What I'll speak to is I think that narrative through that lens of that white gaze was focusing solely on the action of the slap. You know, I was like, they're not gonna treat this again with care. They're not going to treat this as people. This is going to be more about preserving the image of the academy, right? If this happened off camera, how different would it have been? You know, how would have it been portrayed? How it would have been silenced, what have you? But the fact that this happened on camera, they couldn't deny it. And, you know, thinking about the Oscars and the Academy, I'm like, this is an institution that has excused abuse for many, many years. You know, we think about Harvey Weinstein, we think about Roman Polanski. These were people who were celebrated and it was well known, you know, about the abuse. But the fact that this was, you know, on camera and captured. And just thinking about some of the headlines, like Will Smith became Oscar slapper was a headline that I saw in the New York Post. People started to speak about his aggression or unhinged. I started seeing articles from 4 or 5 years ago about him and Jada's marriage that had no relevance to what happened. And then just also thinking about Chris Rock, again, how are our bodies treated in the media? I'm constantly seeing articles that are showing him being slapped, several pictures over and over again, and video replayed over and over again. So those are kind of my initial thoughts. And I feel like on social media was where I saw a little bit more nuanced conversation, where people were talking about kind of what could have led up to this. People were talking about the influence of patriarchy. People were talking about why is the Black woman the easy person to go to joke for? You know, there were other celebrities that jokes were told about, and they were informed beforehand that this was going to happen. So why this kind of spontaneous joke is it all of a sudden that, you know, it was put upon Jada Pinkett Smith? So that's kind of what piqued my curiosity. But I was very thankful that I didn't have to talk to anybody about it the next day.
Well, interestingly, I teach, that happened on a Sunday night, and I teach a class, a Black psychology class on Monday morning. And we really analyze this from many different levels. And, you know, Dr. Osei, you spoke to so many things, but I really want to sort of tease apart a little bit about, I guess more broadly, the effect on Black people collectively. And, there wasn't just one response, right? Because this was such a layered issue. So just in general, right, of course, as we've watched this get played out, there's a lot of anger at the media for this extended coverage and this, on the one hand that we're arguing or we're speaking to why the media got on the line, a beloved figure, Will Smith, the Fresh Prince, everybody loves Will Smith, but it's like first chance the media got to try to destroy and undermine this man. It just went for it. The punishment that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, 10 years. Okay, well, I mean, none of us sit on the Academy board, but so we don't know if that's a lot or a little, but it's like, 10 years, huh? Well, let's see, was anything said to the actor, I'm forgetting his name, but who, gave a kiss to Halle Berry when she didn't ask for it, when he won an award? I'll remember his name in a minute, but it'll come back to me. But, wasn't that kind of like an assault on her person, right? But she's a Black woman, so it's okay for a white male actor to plant a kiss unasked, on the lips of a Black woman, right? So that says a lot about women, the whole gender thing. But just, I want to speak to a couple of other things. It's a lot of people felt a lot of anger. It's like, why did Will have to do that and act out in front of this white audience? And that speaks to, yes, being under the white gaze, and which speaks more broadly to Black people cannot be experienced as individuals, right? Because we've got to represent others. And the behavior, the bad behavior, if you will, that we engage in, it's like, oh, you're messing it up for everybody else. And sociologist, Robin DiAngelo speaks about this in her writings, that, white people get to live as individuals. They never represent others, right? A Kyle Rittenhouse, a Dylan Roof, right? We're not running afraid of young white men and feeling that we have to take some action because one individual, engaged in a horrific act. Just I think Dr. Osei alluded to it, but just the also the issue of Chris Rock makes a joke about a Black woman's hair. I mean, that has, Black women in general, right? Again, maligned in so many ways over the years. And the issue of hair, the aesthetic, right? Black women's hair. I mean, this only recently, right? This Crown Act was passed that made it illegal, right, for employers and in school settings to determine how Black girls and women should wear their hair. Why in the world do we need an act, a legislation around Black women's hair? Because it is determined by this culture that we live in, that this is a lovely aesthetic, long, straight hair. And if your hair is coarse, curly, quote unquote, nappy, that is not aesthetically pleasing. So, there was a lot of anger about this issue being brought up in this context. And, again, it's like this shame and embarrassment. And this is not shame and embarrassment that we created, but it's the reality of the culture, the society that we live in, that Black people, the features of Black people, are marginalized. It's deemed unacceptable. And who gets to determine that? So there are many people who felt like, yeah, well, Will had to stand up for his wife, and especially for an issue such as this, because this speaks to a broader issue of how we are regarded as a people. But it's this was quite a moment, and the media went to town on this one.
Dr. Wallace?
So much quite the moment, Vanessa, that this was not a part of our original script, right? It's kind of like, we had to talk about this because literally somewhere you can see that slap happening right now, 3 weeks later or so, right? And again, talking about that constant repetition, but what that did to someone with a 30-year career of literally no issue, no violence, no nothing. What that did is it kind of perpetuated the stereotype that Black men are violent. And now we, oh, wow, Will too? Like that's basically what a lot of people probably started to think that evening. And unlike Dr. Osei, because I am a publicist and I teach the public relations courses here at LaGuardia, I got calls immediately, like literally it was a hotline on my phone. And I was like, brother, sister, I do not represent Will Smith. But I got a lot of calls and people were saying, well, what does he do? What does he? And immediately, because I thought, well, what's this a skit first too, like a lot of us. And then moving forward after we realized, well, actually, once I knew that the Academy, when they muted him, that's when I knew immediately, because I watched it live. So once they muted him, I said, oh, this is real right here. And that's a problem. The constant repetition though, and that lack of control, that was a concern for me because again, this is how people view Black people. And is it fair? No. Is it something that's been constant in the media from many years? Yes. And now what that looks like is, oh, wow, even the good ones are violent too.
Well, now we can move from one form of entertainment to another form of entertainment. And I would really love it if the panel could speak to social media, because social media has become a force to be reckoned with. TikTok, Instagram, Meta or Facebook, whatever you want to call it. The internet has become a tool. And I'm really curious, a source for information for a generation of people. So how do you think social media has impacted the Black Lives Matter movement? Would you say it's a positive impact, a negative impact, or just the combination of both, which is normally the case?
It's hard to say it's an impact. It's an impact. I mean, social media has many benefits as far as being able to offer a wide range of views. To be able to offer information, it's offered through social media that I have to learn about, current events or what's happening. But there is, I think about that anonymity, and that sense of kind of saying whatever or feel like, oh, it's just a difference of opinion, which I tell people, you can't really have a difference of opinion about Black people's humanity. That's not a difference of opinion, that's something else. And so there's, those disadvantages and those concerns there. Also with social media is recognizing that it can have an influence in changing people's opinions. I came across a study that talked about 23% of people who had been on social media felt like it changed their opinion about the Black Lives Matter movement and issues related to police brutality. So it does have the ability to shape policy in the ways that we've seen, or shape opinions and policy in the ways that we've seen with traditional forms of media. And then lastly, just kind of thinking about, I think it also allows for a diverse range of voices to be heard. It's through different types of social media that I've heard a lot of criticism about like BLM as far as like the organization. And allowing maybe people who wouldn't necessarily be in front of the camera or the people that would be featured on traditional forms of media, that we begin to kind of hear their viewpoints and not see us as this kind of like monolithic group, and seeing diversity within group. And so that's kind of what stood out to me as far as like social media.
So this one's a hard one for me, and I've admitted to my colleagues, I do not do a whole lot of social media. I really don't, because I find I can see the power of it, and it's sort of like it can be used for good, as it were. But I remember recently, I guess it was the anniversary of January 6th, I saw someone put a post that compared Black Lives Matter with January 6th. And the post was, basically making the comparison that Black Lives Matter movement was so much more violent, is so much more violent than what happened on the January 6th insurrection. And so I look at that and I think, oh, really? And when I see things like that, which is what makes me actually stay away from social media, it's like, a few people have this idea, they put it out, and then there are likes, 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 likes. And then these things take a life of their own, and it has a way of influencing people's thought, right? And the more something travels, it's just exposure, exposure. The more people are exposed to ideas, they take it in. And it's like, maybe that's so. So it's again, I don't think I can speak with any real authority, but it's just I feel like with anything, there's the power that can be used for good, and then there's this other sort of negative force that can be used to really malign and really discredit organizations that are really trying to do something good and really send very powerful messages. That Black lives do matter and have to matter. So I'll just leave it at that.
First of all, I join all of them, right? Because I'm a communication person. So I kind of want to always keep my ear to the street and see what's going on. And on TikTok, I'm about to start challenges. I'm just kidding. That Hey Baby challenge is all right though. So who knows? We'll see. Catch me outside. But with that said, agreeing to what Vanessa said, that on one end, it's phenomenal because messages are getting out there very, very quickly, positive messages. Some people that need some concepts explained to them on TikTok. There's some great people on Instagram. There's some great people that are just sharing excellent content. So, Twitter, all these places where you can really get some great information. And then on the positive side, I am seeing the most beautiful Nigerian weddings, like just beautiful. Like, I'm just like, wait a minute, this is gorgeous. So I love the constant, beautiful, positive exposure of people all over the world, Black people all over the world that we did not see before. These things were always happening. We just did not see them before. So again, we have to kind of take the good with the bad on this. I was talking to my colleague earlier, Juliana earlier, about how with Ukraine, like these horrible images of war, they've always happened. We just didn't see it. So the power of social media, and again, things like that can be dangerous for our psyche. That constant repetition of those images can be horrible. So speaking to TikTok, Instagram, I'm thankful for them, but again, you have to take the good with the bad. And there's just so many levels to the social media situation in terms of people internalizing things. And I'm a publicist, so I know how people flex and do things for clout and for whatever reasons, just because of that imagery that they're trying to put out. So, there's good and bad. It's a personal thing. And I think we have to police ourselves with how much we take in. And very important, what we expose our children to. But that's another story.
Yeah, but definitely mental health wise, I think like recognizing the impact, and being in tune with yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah.
And, with my clients, especially when it just felt like there was something going wrong every single day. I mean, it still feels like that now, but there was a period of time, like I think in the past year, where every day I was just waking up and it was something, and really having to talk to them about monitor your use, set up those boundaries. Do you need to be checking it throughout the day? Like, when are those times when you can have device-free time? Because oftentimes we won't realize how much it's affecting us till our body kind of lets us know. I felt myself like very fatigued, having headaches, very dehydrated, and I just felt like I was consuming too much that was kind of affecting me being able to be present.
Well, everyone on the panel has addressed the issue of how media has had a physical and emotional impact on them. I want to ask the panel, could you really address how media has had a stereotypical racist and gendered bias? And, how has media had this kind of impact on the Black community? How is the imagery, and, how is the, what the media is purported or put out into the world, how has it impacted Black self-perception and or identity? And how do we help students and or for those who are in the profession, how do we raise awareness about these internalized messages, and how do we take steps to unlearn or confront those messages?
I can start with this one. So rewind to around the Jim Crow era from 1877 to 1964, 10 years before I was born, right? And what happened right prior to 1877, right? Free Black people. And those people were migrating all over the place and trying to build their lives and doing the best things. But right around these times, we have the negative gendered stereotypical images in media pop up. So we're seeing around these times, we're seeing all the blackface. We're seeing The Birth of a Nation, which was 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation, that literally they showed white men in blackface eating chicken. And that stereotype is one of the reasons why till this day, you have some Black people that don't feel comfortable eating chicken in public. Black people in the cartoons of the big pink lips, and Black people eating watermelon, and just the lazy stereotypes of lazy Black men, irresponsible Black men. In Birth of a Nation, I referenced earlier, white men in blackface, trying to assault a white woman. And that was one of the most popular films of that time, one of the most controversial. And who was the hero in Birth of a Nation? The Ku Klux Klan. So when you have that type of, and it was shown in the White House, there was like a film screening of it in the White House at that time. I believe Woodrow Wilson was the president. So when you're looking at those negative images, and of Black men being irresponsible. And then we talked a little bit earlier about what Patricia Hill Collins talked about with her Black feminist thought, with the Mammy image of Hattie McDaniel and Gone with the Wind, and the Jezebel images with Foxy Brown, the beautiful lighter complected Black woman with long hair, and she's buxom and all that stuff, the sexy, the sapphire image of the Black woman who was about my complexion, and she was always trying to quote unquote emasculate Black men. Pam from Martin is that character. She actually always, Tashina Arnold always plays that character, if you really think about it. Like Rochelle from Everybody Hates Chris, a lot of her, but with that said, yeah, I wanted to touch on, and then you have a lot of our Black lives on film and in television, they were written by white people. Our experiences were written by white people. And so Debbie Allen, my hero, she took over second season for A Different World, one of my favorite shows. And so first season was written by directed by a white woman, Black college, white woman directing Black students. Second season, Debbie Allen, who went to Howard University, shout out to HU, I went there too, and Delaware State, but totally different story. So I'm gonna end it because Charlene, I said I wouldn't, I said I wouldn't go off, but I really wanted to talk to that, the importance of us telling our stories, and the importance of, you know, like when I think about Good Times and shows like that, like those were white writers. Those were all white writers. So it's like, Houseway, when you have people like oh goodness, I can't think of James' real name in real life, but James in Florida, that's primarily why they left the show, because of the way that the character JJ was portrayed. So I'll stop now. Yeah, I think, yeah, I'll stop now.
You covered so much there, Shaunee. I mean, really, because all of those images, Black men as scary, threatening, hostile, clutch your bags when you see them because they're the threat. They are a threat. We remember the Central Park bird watcher, right? The woman has to call in because, he dared to speak to her, and she knew that, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to tell them that there's a Black man. That's because the image is seared in our mind. Black men are dangerous. Black women are ugly. Like, let's think about, the treatment that Michelle Obama received, Serena Williams. I mean, and the caricatures of these Black women, right? Our natural hair is unacceptable, right? And because of that, a lot of these messages get internalized. So, and I'm all for folks, sisters wearing their hair any way they want to, but it's when you feel like I have to straighten my hair, I have to get weaves just so that I can be acceptable in my work environment. I need to fit into this culture. I will never make it in corporate America if I don't have a certain aesthetic. And that creates an incredible amount of stress, but also, right, internalized racism, colorism, right? Because we get these messages that dark-skinned, dark-complected Black people are somehow more menacing, right? Let's, keep trying to see if we can lighten up our skin tone with skin lightening creams. And these products have been around for years. And, I've, come to learn more recently, like in so many other cultures, this exists, right? This whole notion, I mean, we've got to lighten our skin. And what is, really troubling is we get so many messages about what's not good in Black America until it is decided that, oh, this is kind of cool. I mean, most of the folks on the panel are probably too young to know, but years ago, there was the actress Bo Derek who all of a sudden started to wear her hair in cornrows like this. And the media called it the Bo Derek look. The what? The Bo Derek look. Black people have been wearing the hair braided, plaited for years. And somehow Bo Derek got to be the architect of wearing hair that way. Oh, you want full lips with Botox and rear ends with, I mean, let's go through all the procedures because we want to have this aesthetic that was once very, right, ugly. It's ugly on Black people. Full lips are ugly on Black people. But go spend money and get Botox to get your lips a little fuller. These are just very, destructive messages. And, when young girls, young boys and girls take these messages in, I've seen so many young girls like tell their mothers, they want to have their hair straightened, they want to have their hair permed, they want, because they want to have a different look in order to be accepted. I mean, we've got to get beyond that. And parents have to educate their children and we have to, school teachers. I mean, we can't have schools telling us, your child was sent home because her hair looks too wild and woolly. I mean, that's what this Crown Act was all about. So, I mean, there's so much more, but it's just, it does affect us. It affects how we feel about our own people, about our skin color. And we've got to do a better job of just sort of reclaiming our own aesthetics and talking about how, this culture that we've all been reared in, has been, centered in whiteness, white aesthetics. And we are expected to go along with that in order to be integrated and deemed acceptable. So, but there's a lot more.
Vanessa, can I piggyback on right quick that right here at LaGuardia, I had a student come up to me after class. She was a young Black woman And she said, I'm ugly. She said, because we were talking about something like just in terms of the content. And she came after class and she said, Professor, I'm ugly. I do not feel beautiful at all. And I remember thinking immediately, I have work to do. Not on my watch, not on my watch. I have work to do. Because at the end of the day, we've been blessed with this opportunity. And I can't let that go. We can't let that go. We cross paths for a reason, you know, young sis. So yeah, I remember that very well a few years ago.
You know, and it makes me think so much about what W.B. Du Bois talked about with that double consciousness, right? We're growing, we have our own internal experience that we're monitoring, but we've learned to view ourselves through someone else's eyes. You know, and there's an author of this book, The Body Is Not Apology. I'm forgetting their name at this time, but I loved what they wrote about this idea of this inside and this outside voice and how it contributes to body shame, right? We have these messages that we constantly see that suggest there's a certain bodily hierarchy or features that are considered more acceptable that are steeped in whiteness. And that's kind of the outside voice that's communicating to us of not being enough. But what happens is we begin to kind of internalize those messages and believe those messages about ourselves. And so they talk of this idea of kind of radical self-love and turning down the volume of that outside voice and turning up the volume of our inside voice to kind of push back on those stories that we've been told over and over. And how do we create our own counter narratives? You know?
I think it's Renee Taylor. I think she might have written that book, The Body's Not an Apology.
Yes, thank you.
Well, we've talked about a lot today. We've covered a lot, but also in line with the theme of this entire event, I wanted to ask the panel, how do you think we can use media to create Black joy, you know, in our communities? Because right now things are kind of all over the place. How do we now use this tool that's so ubiquitous to create joy, create positivity, to create justice? How do we do that when we have so many signals that constantly are, you know, this idea of being constantly oppressed by these power structures?
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead, Dr. Osei.
Oh, say. You know, I just love, there's this interview with Toni Morrison, and she talks about the white gaze and authors who write through that kind of white gaze, and when she kind of really learned to kind of write her characters and not feel like she had to explain things or justify things. And so I just really think about, like, how do we center ourselves in our stories, in our narratives? And you just feel like those moments, like whenever you have that moment where you just aren't thinking about how someone else sees you right now, and you just feel free and present in that moment. And to me, that's really what symbolizes Black joy. I remember I was watching a video on social media, and there was this rapper who had featured a different bunch of dancers from social media. And in that moment, they were just dancing and just enjoying it and supporting each other. And there was no like, what are people going to think about this? Why are you doing X, Y, Z? It's just like you're there in that moment. And I love kind of, you know, the different characters, like just recognizing our complexity, you know, I think, and really just recognizing our humanity as complex individuals. And I love, you know, some of the characters that are coming out now. Like, I loved Annalise Keating on How to Get Away with Murder. I thought Viola Davis was great, and I loved it because she could be so many things. You could see the stereotype of kind of the mammy figure taking care of everyone, being the strong Black woman, but she could be sexual, she could be flawed, she could struggle with drinking, she could be mean, she could be angry, and she wasn't just one thing. And I think the more that we're allowed to tell our stories and be in front of the camera, behind the camera, having that control, I think, makes such a difference, you know, when it comes to what we think, you know, is liberation, what is Black joy in media.
I love to see it. Dr. Osei, I love to see it. I think about, I referenced Audre Lorde earlier, and she talks about the mythical norm in America. And often when I talk about this with my students, we all stand up. And I say, sit down if you identify with, and I name the following: if you are thin. No, excuse me, keep standing if you are thin. Keep standing if you are white. Keep standing if you are male. Keep standing if you are young. Keep standing if you are heterosexual. Keep standing if you are Christian. Keep standing if you are financially secure. And by the end of the class, everyone's sitting down. So that mythical norm that Audre Lorde talks about, that is those groups, those are the protected groups. And typically that is that white heterosexual male. So those stories are being pushed to the front. Those stories are those are the positive stories, anything associated with that. Knowing this, we have to counteract that. So when Dr. Osei just talked about Viola Davis playing Annalise Keating, who created that character? Shonda Rhimes, right? And so the power in going back to Debbie Allen and creating our stories is very, very important, because we see life through the lens of people like us who've experienced. And the thing is, we can all learn. When I tell my students about a Black Heritage Month in February and the events that we were having, the Black Lives Matter week, we can all learn. This is not just for Black people. We can all learn. And guess what? We may have similar experiences with one another. How about that, right? We pull this back, we're all a little bit of the exact same for the most part. So with that, the joy comes in, piggybacking what Dr. Osei said, the joy comes in knowing that there's the Ava DuVernay's, knowing that our stories are being told. This week is Black Maternal Health Week. And I hate the fact that Black women who are pregnant, are expecting, have such crazy experiences with the healthcare system that leading often to their death. But guess what? Good Morning America covered this morning, Black Maternal Health Week. And I was so grateful for that, because we need more story sharing about midwives and things like that are going to help the Black experience to be just a personal experience. So I think I'll stop there. But yeah, I find so much joy in, I'm a dancer, so the Black boy joy and Black girl, I'm here for that. Things that just make me smile. In a world that we're living in today, I found so much joy in the freedom to be able to do what I can do. Just mind, body, and soul. I love that. So we can't let the media, and again, we know differently, but it's the onus is on us to help share the messages that we can't let the media do this to us. Make people think that mythical norm is all that matters.
I think the only thing I can add to that is that, Black people, African descended people, we are a joyful people who celebrate. We celebrate everything. And, maybe not enough of that is put out there. And this is where I see social media could be very helpful, because when I think about, family reunions, fish fries, Kwanzaa celebrations, Juneteenth celebration, put those out there and show the joy, the love that we share. Just yesterday afternoon, Shaunee, Charlene, and I, we were talking and we were laughing up a storm. And it was just sort of connecting with one another, that sisterhood. We're different, we come from different places and spaces, but we are joined by our collective history, our culture, and we can talk about stuff, use jargon from our home community. And we know
bonnet.
Right. We know exactly what's happening. And we were just, such laughter and joy. And the fact that we are able to maintain, we as a people are able to maintain that laughter and joy in the face of so much adversity on a day-to-day basis. Because even those of us who have risen to a certain level, we still daily, everything we've talked about, we experience the pain, but we know how to be joyful. And I remember so many years ago, I think my grandmother, my mother used to tell me, don't let anybody steal your joy. And so we're going to reclaim our joy. We're going to, just live out our joy. And yeah, yes, we need to put it out more. Maybe I need to start using more social media and do a little TikTok thing myself and, let everybody know where the party's at, where it's fun, where it's happening, that we can laugh. We got a lot of important things to say, but we know how to have fun.
That's one of the reasons I love doing panels like this, because I haven't met anyone in this panel before, but as soon as I walked in, I knew this is a space I'll be seen and heard. And I think that's so important, is finding spaces where you can be visible. You can bring all the different aspects of yourself into a space and be seen, because there's so many times where we're muting, we're pushing down, we're pushing away. And so the importance of kind of having those spaces in your life, whatever way they can look like, whether it's physical, virtual, what have you.
And I just want to say, I so appreciate that, particularly that last message from Victoria in the chat. Definitely, we appreciate you, and we are here for you. You got a community.
Mhm. Right. We have to depend on each other. We have to be able to rely on each other. I want to take this opportunity. That's it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the panel, all you youth out there. Pay attention to the wisdom and the knowledge that's been dropped in the last hour. Pay attention. And if any of you need help, any kind of assistance, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us, because that's what we're here for. So I want to thank the panel. You guys did a bang up job as usual. And I want to call attention to the survey that's in the chat as well. If everyone could take a minute and respond to the survey. And also too, we'd like to open up the floor to questions. If there's anyone that has a question for the panel, please feel free. Let's get it. Let's talk about it.
And I saw a comment about feeling, you have to prove your humanity. And I remember definitely feeling that over and over again. And I started with this affirmation that I'm trying out now, which is just saying to myself, as a Black queer woman resisting the white gaze, I insert blank, to remind myself that this is who I am. I don't have to prove my worth to anyone, and this is what I'm resisting every day.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And shout out to our colleague, Dr. Ryan Van Hamilton, because he talked about the being Black Latino. Yeah. And that's a whole nother situation as a Black Latina. Shout out to Costa Rica. We're about to take it all with the soccer. Anyway, but the thing is, I only saw myself through Celia Cruz. And that was many years ago. God bless Celia Cruz. So, these are things that, again, the media has the control over. Thank God for Amara La Negra. And seriously, but, and there are many Black Latinos, but in terms of seeing myself, it's unfortunate. So again, we have to create these opportunities. I'm big on that. We have to create these opportunities.
We have a question. Please excuse me if I mispronounce your name, but Adjoa Osei. He asks, what can we do to stop the media from broadcasting biased news?
You can't, because First Amendment. So they can do whatever they choose to do. And what's even worse, I was just talking about research to my students today, and we have to be careful of what we, what we are frequently viewing in terms of getting where we get our news. No shade to the shade room, right? Baller alert and all that. But where are you getting your news? And who's writing it? Are these ethical journalists? And we need to understand the importance of responsible journalism and where we're getting our journalism and where we're getting our news and our information from, who has an interest in those stories and creating those stories. But to answer your question, Akbar, you cannot. You can only counter them. You can only counter them. So you have to create stories that are of equal level playing field. And that's why I say, and I'll say it a million times, being that person that you do not see, creating that outlet that you do not see, that's, you might be called to do that. You know, if being, you know, create, you can do it now, create a podcast, go to journalism school, take my class, take my public relations classes, right? And this will help, it really will. Social media helps with all of that though.
Thank you, Mr. Hossein, for that question. Anybody else have any questions? I'm sure you have questions related to media, questions related to race, any questions that you might have. This is Vegas. Ask what you might. Well, wait a minute now, not too much, but let's say like Vegas. No other questions?
What happens in the media?
Oh, here's one. Curious about reactions to CUNY students' petitions to cancel the Emmett Till opera written by a white female playwright. So anybody have any comments about that? I didn't know about that. So
you know what? I didn't know about the CUNY petition, but I did hear about the actual situation with the playwright. And the only thing I did when I saw the headline was give it the side eye. But then again, there are excellent playwrights of all races and backgrounds, cultural backgrounds and whatnot. So for me personally, I did not dive deep into the story, but I just remember saying, because Emmett Till's story is very, very sensitive. And you know, his mother took ownership over that situation when she put his mutilated body on display. And the, I believe it was Ebony and Jet, thank God for the Johnson family that they had the courage to share those stories and those images of his mutilated body. So that right there was, she took the ownership, and even though she's passed on, I'm curious to know how the playwright got interest. Did she talk to the families? Things like that, I'm not sure about. Did she get permission? You know.
well, actually, there was Tremaine Lee did a really good podcast about the recent passing of the Emmett Till Lynching Act. And I'm gonna stick it in the chat. It's crazy. It's crazy because basically the podcast discussed with Emmett Till's cousin, who was actually present when the whole thing popped off. So if you have an opportunity, it's only 30 minutes long, take a listen. The majority of it speaks to what actually happened that day. And that's a story that we don't really hear that story too often from someone who's there. So if you want to take a look in the chat, that might help.
Yeah, this is the first I'm hearing of it. I know someone put a link about the protests. I'm definitely going to take a look at that. It just makes me have more questions. Like, you know, as you're saying, kind of like what brought your interest into it? Who else is involved? Are you understanding like the legacy and the history around this? So those are kind of the immediate thoughts, because even sometimes, you know, we say this all the time, not all skin folk are kinfolk, right? And so even though someone might share an identity, you know, based on our skin color, that also doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing the work of challenging, you know, white supremacy and these internalized beliefs that we can hold. But I would want to know more information about that. But it makes me wary. You know, you always get a little, you get a little on edge.
I mean, you have to have a little skepticism, but you know, I keep an open mind. I mean, Ken Burns did a great documentary on the Central Park Five back in the day. So, you know, he's a white person, but I mean, this Emmett Till, that's a very personal story, very painful story. So I would definitely want to know more about why this person took this up.
Well, we've pretty much run out of time, and I know some of the panelists have to move on to other matters, so I want to close this down. Again, I want to thank the panelists. I think it was great, and I'm very proud of you guys, and I'm happy we had this time to spend together. Also, too, I want to thank everyone who attended. I want to thank the students. I want to thank faculty and staff. Provost Sicario. I want to thank everyone who attended, and hopefully this gave us an opportunity to exchange, share. We were listening, and make us a better world, make us a better country, so that we understand each other and we can move forward collectively and not independently. So again, I want to thank everybody. You know, Black Power, rock out, y'all. See you later.
Oof. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Later, guys. Thank you, everyone. Oh, there is.
Survey.
Yeah, don't forget the survey, guys.
Okay. When I say God was on my side, yes, he was. When I say God was on my side, yes.
Stop the recording.
He was.